All right, Russ, are you ready?
I'm ready, man. Let's do it.
Let's get to it. Investors, welcome back to the channel for another round here of Masters of the Market. Now, I am incredibly excited because here with me today is Russ from Dapper Dividends. He is a man that I've been watching for some time now on YouTube as a fellow dividend investor. Now, he's got quite a story from, as he shares, just barely graduating high school, joining the Navy, then becoming a welder, and now a dividend investor. Now, Russ, I want to pass it right over to you and immediately put you right on the hot seat. Are you ready for this first question?
I'm ready. I want to salute you, Ari. Thank you for having me on. I really do appreciate this, inviting me to be here. So let's get going, man. Let's fire it up. Get that hot seat hot. I love it.
Let's kick this off right now with just opening up with the total value of your portfolio.
So that's tricky because there is the portfolio I share on the channel and on this journey and whole thing. And then I have a mutual fund portfolio, which is through my 401k through work. So I don't share that one, but the one that I do share, and I'll have Ari share the link down below. You can check out. I have 3 different portfolios. I have a taxable account, I have a self-directed IRA, and then I have a Roth IRA account. So those 3 portfolios are just under $150,000.
Let's go.
Net worth in those. So yeah, but there's a link at thedividendtracker.com. And I just use that so any of you watching can just, go in and snoop around and be a voyeur and look at what I have and what I'm investing in right now.
What it's all about, following through on what other dividend investors are doing, especially those who have been seeing success. And speaking about success, I want to go back to your story, Russ, before we get into all the dividend talk, because when I shared a message with you earlier today, just send me a brief here on how you'd like me to introduce you. One of the things that you highlighted was you just barely graduated high school and then you joined the Navy. And of course, then you got into welding and maybe take 900 and something. Now you're here as a dividend investor. But let's go all the way back. Let's go back to high school for Russ. And, I want to get like a sense of how you were operating at that point in time, because I feel like it's such a different shift in a mindset from where you were now to today, from being on the grind, the 9 to 5 actual welding grind, and actually having time to have your own YouTube channel and build a dividend investment portfolio, a very successful one. So can you take us back and kind of share your story of how you got here?
Yeah, I mean, well, I'll try and make it as brief as possible, but I'm a little bit older than, well, I don't know. If you just had Chuck on, as I say that, Chuck from Fast Crafts, which is really cool that you had him on. So not quite that old, but age really is just a number. And I still feel like I'm just out of high school. But yeah, I wasn't very good in academics, and I had to go to summer school in order to get my diploma. So I wasn't able to graduate with my class, which is, I say, barely graduated. I grew up on the outskirts of Chicago. Well, that sounds weird. Not the suburbs of Chicago. Yeah, and high school was just not a lot of fun. I have 2 daughters that are in high school right now, so that's kind of interesting being on that side of it as being somebody in and now having 2 kids. So they hate it, and I told them, everybody hates it, but dude, like in life, there's things that you're going to want to have end or be over with, but you're going to have to do them. And in the Navy, we had a term called embrace the suck, meaning that you put a smile on your face if you have to do something really dirty or really not fun that you have to do and get it done. So just like say, hey, roll up the sleeves and let's get it done. But yeah, I had a stepfather that him and I were like oil and water. So when I was almost ready to graduate high school, he's like, hey, you're about to graduate. So if you're going to keep living here, you're going to have to pay us room and board, and you're going to have to pay for this and help for bit. I was like, okay, I get the hint. Like, I'll see you guys later. So yeah, I was 17 when I joined the Navy, wanted to see something different. Did my time in the Navy. Dude, it was awesome. I didn't go to college, so that was like my college time. Saw all 24 time zones, the equator, both hemispheres by the time I was 20. So that was, I don't know, it was pretty cool. I got paid to travel the world, spent all my money, blew it all, on drinking, gambling, and women. I don't recommend anybody to do that. But hey, you know what? You can't frown too much upon the past things that you've done because it makes you who you are. It brings you to where you are. And whoever you are watching this, including you, Ari, you wouldn't be who you are right now, right here today, if you didn't do the things that you did in your past. And you have to have those things to become who you are. And I don't know about you, but I wouldn't want to be anybody else than who I am, right?
I love it. I love it. We might as well stop right there. That was great.
Yep.
No. Okay, so you went into the Navy. One of my questions was going to be, was it the guarantee, of seeing the world, traveling the world, seeing the whole world? Is that what they gifted you with, to actually see the world when you were 17 to 20 years old? Was that a correct sales pitch on their end?
Nah. I was the easiest sales pitch. So I grew up lower middle class,
Sure.
and we didn't have much money. So I just said, I want to get out of here. I want to see something different. I had a great uncle that was in the Navy during Vietnam. So I thought, you know what? Kind of continue in that tradition. My grandfather was in the Coast Guard during World War II. Him and I were really tight. He was like the dad I never had. So I was like, I'll just keep it nautical. The family's got a bit of a nautical history. And I know that I wanted to see something other than the United States. So I figured, you know what? I'll join the Navy. And sure enough, I got to see something other than the United States. So I basically walked in and said, yeah, I did really bad on the ASVAB, which is the military aptitude test. And I just kind of breezed through it. I passed it with so I didn't really get to pick what I wanted to do. And I just said, hey, whatever you got, throw me on a boat somewhere and I'll be happy. So I was the easiest sell for the recruiting team. But yeah, I ended up on an aircraft carrier, which I got behind me here, the USS John C. Stennis. I was put into the G4 weapons elevator division. So I learned how to work with tools. I learned welding, just all those kinds of things that I kind of cross-reference now and do with my hands. So that's how I make the money, man. I work with tools. I work with my hands out in the heat, out in the cold, and
well, first of all,
trying to invest it now.
Regardless of how you got there, I thank you for your service. And I think it led you right then into what sounds like your next career move, which was welding.
Oh, yep.
So you started welding?
Yeah. I could talk. You could just, you could ask me what time it is and I'll tell you how to build a watch. So don't worry about trying to set me up too much. You can lob those softballs at me. But yeah, so when you're at least in the late 90s, I got out of the Navy in 1999. So I told you I'm a little bit older. I'm one of those people that knows what it was like to drive a car and not have a cell phone. Nobody had cell phones, at least as we know them of today. I had pagers, beepers. Did you ever have a beeper?
I had a old Motorola flip phone. That was my first phone. It was like a little brick, phone that I had. And when my mother gave it to me, I was like, wow, and I and I remember, finally going, in the neighborhood, we had a basketball court. And I remember showing up to the basketball court and taking out the phone and showing everybody that, look what I just got. I was 15 when I was gifted with that phone, but it was a life changer.
My Motorola, what happened to them? I think they used to be a dividend paying stock. Maybe they are still. I don't know. Good question. That's a different discussion for a different day. So anyways, yeah, you learn skills in the military, whatever it is. And a lot of times they can cross reference to something out into the world. So I tried to get in with elevators like Otis Elevator, ticker OTIS. That's a dividend stock. They were spun out of Raytheon. So Raytheon had acquired I take that back. United Technologies. Raytheon acquired United Technologies, which was ticker UTX, and they also had Carrier, which repairs HVAC, or it's an HVAC company. They don't repair it; they build it, and they spun out Otis and Carrier, and then Raytheon and United Technologies merged into one. But where was I going with this? Oh, yes. So they cross-reference your skills and they put me into, sorry, my phone. It's always blowing up. That's how it is around.
It's a good sign.
So they hooked me up with a company that is doing what I'm doing now. I work on commercial loading dock equipment, primarily heavy equipment, and installing and doing things like that. And I've been doing that. I say I still want to know what I'm going to do when I grow up, because I don't know. You know, when I got doing this, I just wanted to do it for a minute because the pay was good. And I remember telling a buddy, like, yeah, man, I'm getting like $18 an hour, which was pretty good in 99. And I was like, yeah, I think I'll do this for a few months and, you know, then see what else is out there. And then, yeah, you meet couple girls and the one that became my wife, and then kids, and all of a sudden it's now almost 24 years later that I've been doing this. So that's my work life history thing.
In that 24-year span of time, because that's a long minute that went by, when did you start investing?
That was, well, I've always been investing. Let me stutter there, because in 2003 I got hooked up with our 401k plan, which I didn't even know what I was invested, whatever they recommended. I think I remember just telling the rep from whoever it was, just like, yeah, whatever you suggest, like put me in it. And he's like, well, you should probably do 5% of your income. And I remember at the time I was like, well, I want to have some money left over. So I was like, why don't we go with 2%, you know? And for years, I did 2% of my pre-tax income. So, you know, that's one of those things that you just look back and you're like, ah, like if I would have just did 10%, like that would have been amazing, all those years of compounding and growth. But again, we can't change our past. So around 2018, I don't know, I just got bit with a bug out of the blue. And maybe it was Providence just smacking me upside the head. But I said, you know what? I think I can be like a wolf of Wall Street. I can be an investor. I can do this, you know, probably take a few months to figure out. And yeah, so that's what started it. I remember like Scottrade and E-Trade and things like that. At the time, they were charging like $5 a trade. And I was like, man, that's too much money. So I remember Googling free stock trading, and Robinhood came up. They were fairly new then still. So got onto Robinhood. And of course, like most people, I started with the penny stocks. Why? Because they were quote unquote cheap. I could buy a lot of shares of something. You know, who wants to buy one share of Johnson & Johnson at $120 when I could get, you know, 10,000 shares of something for $10? Sure. Granted, they're micro penny stocks, and just the odds of you making money are so infinitesimally slim. But that was it, man. Started with, you want to just keep rolling, or you got any questions?
Yeah, I was going to ask.
So keep rocking and rolling.
You got into penny stocks. And this is actually, I thought you were actually going to go in this direction, but you maybe stopped yourself. What was your biggest regret with investing thus far? And I'm assuming it has to do with penny stocks or the 401k, but I'd love to know, you know, what you think at this point in time, your biggest regret or a big mistake that you've made was early on in your investing career.
Yeah, so that's the biggest, and that's when I tell my kids, and I just told them this morning, oddly enough, I said, you know, when you guys start working, because my daughters are almost 15 and 16, so obviously, because we can do math, and this is the Cook County education that was installed in my brain. You -1, they are now 15 and 14. But all kidding aside, we not saving at least 10%. One of the books that I love, The Richest Man in Babylon, always talked about paying yourself first and saving 10%. But I think I'd like to do 20%. And I shared this not too long ago. We recently figured out that our current savings rate last year was 32%, which for me was pretty good. I like that. And also, I had just listened to the Choose FI podcast, and they talked about on the last one that with Money with Katie, I don't know if you know Money with Katie. She's a younger woman and really, really blowing up nicely. But she had said that they ran a kind of like a scenario where over 32 or 34%, yeah, you'll get to your financially independence quicker, but it's almost like a diminishing return. It's not as potent as up to like that. So it's kind of fortuitous. I just so happen to be at 32%, but yeah, definitely not saving at least 10% of my pre-tax income and getting that employer match was the first one. And then just rolling right into the penny stocks is just penny stocks, like just the world of them. It's so difficult to make money with penny stocks. They're open to manipulation. It's such a much harder game to play. And you also have to have very, very cool handed emotions to be able to be successful with penny stocks, which I learned that I didn't. You have to be able to date your trades and not marry them. And my problem is I found out when I bought something, I would fall in love with it. And that was to a fault in the game of penny stocks. But as I soon learned, that fit me like a glove, because when you buy and hold something and you're afraid to sell it, well, you could probably guess what game that works well in.
Yeah, I was just going to say, it just was the perfect almost alley hoop for you to get into dividend investing.
Dude, that's like the basketball players when you see them, they throw the ball off the back of the backboard and then they dunk it. I don't watch basketball, but
how much money did you lose, if you can recall? Did you lose with the penny stocks?
Well, thankfully, I wasn't doing too much, so it was probably a shade under $2,000, which, hey, when you got smaller kids and they're both in school and mortgage and bills, it was money we could lose, but we would have preferred not to, So yeah, it was a lesson. And as we say now, and I know now, and it makes me sleep better at night, is that any money that you lose in the stock market is your tuition to the market. So that was my tuition to take the next step. So, they always say you can find the silver lining in anything if you look hard enough. So for me, that was definitely the silver lining of my penny stock trading days, which probably lasted all of about 8 months, 7-8 months, something like that.
Fair amount of time.
Yeah.
It's funny you say that, because it immediately, when you started talking about penny stocks and learning lessons, the first thing that came to mind for me was the University of Hard Knocks. And you sound like a perfect graduate from the University of Hard Knocks, graduating magna cum laude from that university, because, I have to say, I think, and, definitely in my history as an investor, I've made plenty of mistakes. I never got into penny stock investing, but I certainly did get into the riskier plays. Like, I would look at like Kathy Woods' portfolio or a big meme stock and be like, well, let me try my odds at it. Very, very early on, I think I only lost like $500 to $1,000. And I said, that is not for me at all. I started off with building a portfolio worth of ETFs and index funds. So VTI was like my foundation. I think we've actually spoken about this a couple of times. And then from there, I started building individual stock positions within my portfolio. I want to go back to you. And when you started building that dividend investment portfolio, did you get started with, after losing the money, 8 months goes by, you're losing money, there's that pivot point. Did you immediately get into ETFs, like the safer route, or did you go into individual stocks when it comes to dividend stocks? Which route did you pick, or did you mix and match?
It was a shift right into individual dividend stocks. And the way that it all went down is one of my better picks at the time. So penny stock is, the definition as I understand it, is any stock that's $5 or less. And at the time, this was a slightly more, but NIO, the EV car company, I thought I was being a little bit smarter, and Tesla was really starting to take off. Too bad I didn't just stay in a Tesla. That's another mistake. This is a very important one, actually, for those of you watching. Always remember that you got to do your own due diligence and develop your own convictions on anything. Because I had started a position in Tesla and it was only 2 shares, and it was when they were right around $200 a share, pre-split, mind you. So I was liking it, and I was thinking I might get this up to 10 shares just to see where it goes. And of course, I wasn't a dividend investor yet, but there was a podcast that I listened to, actually 2 separate ones, with Wall Street veterans, people in the know that know what they're talking about. And they both said the same thing, that Tesla is burning cash. It's a really nice product, but a very poorly run company. And it's just a matter of time until they go bankrupt. And they said, so they felt bad. I remember one said, when I made the decision, he's like, I feel bad for all these retail investors that are in Tesla, because look at how much cash they're burning. And it's just going to be, maybe 4 or 5 months, 6 months, they're going to be out of cash. They're going to file for bankruptcy. They're going to have to, sell all the assets. Some other company's going to buy Tesla's assets, and then those shareholders are going to be the ones to make out. So I thought I was being smart. Sold those 2 shares. That they were like 220. I made like maybe like $20 a share on each one.
Yeah.
And that was dumb. That was, well, maybe not dumb, because I didn't know any better. We don't want to be that hard on ourselves, but I didn't know any better. And they obviously ran up to, when they split, I don't remember, they were like a couple $1,000s a share. And yeah, so that, taken like a $20 profit, $40, I probably could have made easily $4,000 if I just stayed in it. But that taught me a very valuable lesson, that I don't care who it is, nobody knows the future. And especially on Wall Street, everybody likes to make predictions about things and what's going to happen. And everyone loves predictions because anyone can make predictions. But what I've come to find is something a little more valuable is to look at the history and look at past things, because it's almost certain that everything that's happened before will happen again. And I just think it can be much more profitable for you to study history and spend more time looking at market history and what has happened in the past than listening to people and their future predictions. So that was one of the things that started the shift. And because I said, I sold Tesla, so I was looking for another one. And it just so happened in September of 2018 that NIO IPO'd. And I was like, wow, everyone said they're the Tesla of China. Worked my way up to 100 shares. And I was learning options. A lot of you might not know, covered calls, selling calls. You make a little bit of income if you have 100 shares of a stock. Without going too much further into it, the dang thing, I was selling covered calls, and I thought it was being slick on it. When NIO obviously shot up, it locked me into that. But before I did that, so I skipped over here. NIO had been going down. I was in around $9 a share, and they were down around, like, I don't know, they got to like $4, $5, $6, something like that. And I was losing sleep because I kept putting more money into it, and it just kept going down. So I would look at something called StockTwits, which is an app, which is still fun. I still use it to this day. It's kind of like high school potty humor. There's some good ideas on there, but it's like Twitter, but just for stocks. And at 4:00 in the morning, I think in Chicago, my time here, the pre-market would open. So I started waking up at like 3:30 in the morning to see if NIO was going up in pre-market. And after a couple of nights, dude, I was losing sleep. And it was just like, I don't think this is how it's supposed to be. Now, my grandfather had been an investor, but he wasn't like hardcore. We didn't really talk much. Unfortunately, I never picked his brain, but he put some money aside for myself and my brothers and himself, obviously, and like mutual funds and things. But a couple times he would buy individual stocks. And I remember one of them was Walmart and AT&T. And I remember he said one time he liked them because they pay good dividends. So there was like 4:30 in the morning one night after a couple nights of just waking up, like heart beating, like, come on, go up. And yeah, I looked up, remembered what he said, looked up dividends. And sure enough, I went down the rabbit hole. Like I say, Alice meet rabbit hole. I went down, and I'm still down the dividend rabbit hole, maybe to a fault, but ask me a question. I'm running on there. This is going to get boring for you people. My God.
Here's what I want to know. You're waking up at 4 a.m. for God knows how many mornings. I'm assuming
probably 3 or so. It was a string there, but yeah.
That at any point, I know with my girlfriend, right? If I wake up at any point early in the morning, she will turn over and be like, "Are you okay? Is everything on?" And usually what happens, now I'm based out of Israel right now. So, 7 hours ahead there's things happening in the US and around the world, right? As in, no matter where you are, at somewhere in the world, people are up and things are happening. So for me, because I'm going to go to sleep and then the market's, still jiving, running, sometimes still kicking, you have news headlines that are coming out. I like to wake up early here because I want to check the news out and everything that's going on when I was asleep. That's usually what will happen. And she'll usually turn over to me and be like, "Are you okay?" Because a big light is now on in the room. And every morning it's the same thing for me. "Yeah, babe, I'm totally good. I'm just looking at the news or the stocks or that." Did your wife ever wake up and say like, Russ, the heck you doing? Like,
Yeah, once, of course. She's like, "Why are you looking again?" She's like, "It's not gonna, you know." And yeah, it wasn't much. She didn't care. Well, I mean, she cared, but then she's like, "Just put your phone down," and then she go back to sleep, you know.
has
But
she has she ever played a role in your investing journey thus far with like how you know, I guess I want to say probably in that first 8 months, because it sounds like the penny stocks and the excitement, but you were losing money, you're waking up at 4 a.m. Did she ever just pull you aside and say, like, hey, like, we're losing money here, or like this is not a good strategy? Is she into investing in the slightest, or is that all your game?
so not really into it. And yes, she would always remind me that she told me not to sell Tesla. So she said, "I'm seeing more of them everywhere." And I was like, yes. I'm like, but so and so on the podcast, I don't want to say his name because I still enjoy him. You know, he got it wrong, but I was like, so and so says they're burning cash. She's like, "I don't know. I keep seeing more of them everywhere. I don't think you should sell." So yes, she would always remind me, "I told you not to sell Tesla." But you know what? Again, we make our mistakes and we learn from them, hopefully, and we don't make them over, right? What do they say? If you make a mistake once, it's a mistake, but if you make it a second time, it's a choice and it's no longer a mistake. So I'm trying to choose to not do things wrong a second time. But yeah, and then it was just dividends from there. I started with AT&T because I remembered, you know, fondly my grandfather mentioning AT&T. Too bad I didn't just buy Walmart, but I started learning then about yield chasing, which AT&T, as we know, cut their dividend. And well, you know, if you listen to them, this is where you got to get careful with Wall Street. And a lot of you, I want you to remember, when you listen to CEOs, and I know this because I've learned it myself, CEOs usually get to where they are because they're really good at talking. They're
Yep.
really good sweet talkers. They're good at spinning the facts. They're good at playing up the positives and downplaying or almost ignoring the negatives. So I remember them talking about that. And, you know, John Stankey, the CEO of AT&T, called it, you know, air quotes, right sizing the dividend, meaning that I remember he said, we're pushing off 20 billion of Warner Brothers Discovery, which they spun out, which was an awful acquisition for them. And then they were like, well, we have $20 billion less. So we have to right size the dividend. And it was a cut.
Sure.
And the way that we know this is when you see a spinoff, when a business splits into, or like Johnson and Johnson and Kenvue, they just spun off their shares of they just spun off Kenvue, which is paying a dividend, and then Johnson and Johnson is still paying the same dividend. So I expect, and this is a little bit of my, you know, market premonition and predictions here, which we just said not to do, right? Was that 3M. Everybody knows 3M, right? Actually, they've been in the news that they're looking to settle the earplug lawsuit.
Just the other day.
But yeah. So interesting too, because I remember putting an article out. I did a video that said on the upper end, it could have been 100 billion. And now here we are, they're talking 6 billion. So that's Wall Street for you. But anyway, so 3M later in the year is going to be spinning off their consumer health, just like Johnson and Johnson did. And they're going to give shares out. So what we need to look for, and why I think that 3M is going to cut their dividend and they're going to do it in the haze of the spinoff, is that we have to look, once they spin off the consumer health segment, what is that paying in a dividend? What is 3M paying in a dividend? And when you add the two together, if it is not what 3M was paying before the spinoff, then it's a cut. So I think they're going to use that opportunity to reduce the dividend. And I'll just fall over laughing if they say they're right sizing the dividend, if they steal one from the Stanky playbook, but that's to be seen. That's a little bit of
over to 3M,
yeah.
but no, you know what? You have a point. So I started working at TipRanks, and you know, at this point, I've been at TipRanks for about 15 months. Now, TipRanks is a site that's out there for analyst ratings, hedge fund activity, insider trading. You know, I got to say the biggest thing that I've learned working, because I've never, as an investor before TipRanks, I've never really listened to analyst ratings. I know a lot of people do, especially now, you know, heading customer success and marketing. And I'm talking to a lot of the community members on what I call customer experience sessions. I do know now a lot of people rely on analysts or, you know, what CEOs are saying, the insiders. But before TipRanks, I honestly just tried to do all my due diligence with a blinder on to analysts and a blinder on to, the inside of the CEOs, what they're saying. And I would really track their actions. So what they're doing, are they buying, are they selling? Not the analysts, the insiders and hedge funds. But what I found really was it's a lot of hocus pocus. And exactly like you shared, a lot of insiders, especially amidst earnings season, always pepping up their stocks. It's really exciting. It looks like Vegas out there on the market streets. And a lot of people lose money. And I have to say, even, TipRanks, sitting in that seat that I do, I still today don't enjoy looking over analyst ratings, because an analyst like me or like you does the same thing. They look at a stock, they do their due diligence on the company, they analyze it. And so for me, it's like, kind of, who is this Joe Schmo? And can he really do a better job than me? I don't know, right? Maybe they have a good track record with a certain company, but that then wraps me right back into dividend investing. And why I even started getting invested into dividend stocks was because I like to sleep at night, aside from waking up early to look at the news. But I like to sleep at night. I like to know that the companies I'm getting invested into, 90%, 95, 99% chances they're going to be there in the next 5, 10 years, 20 years, 30 years, right? So our Johnson & Johnsons that are out there, the Procter & Gamble's, the Coca-Colas, all these nice, reliable stocks. To me, that hooked me on dividend investing. I can sleep, I can invest in the company, at a good or low valuation over time, share price appreciation, and dividends along the way. But there's always that question that I get asked all the time, and I'm sure you get asked it all the time as well, whether it's on your channel, friends, family. Well, Russ, with growth stocks, you can make a heck of a lot more money faster. So what was it about dividend investing for you specifically that really hooked you? Because you had the 8 months run, penny stocks, then Tesla and NEO, and then you went down the rabbit hole of dividend stocks, but you're still with dividend stocks. So can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I think it all comes down to your investor DNA, and not everybody can be so fortunate to find out their investor DNA. Like I said, what I did really well was when I bought something, I work with a tool called a vice grip, and it holds things together really tightly. So I would think, like, I have vice grip hands when I buy something. I hate selling it. So for my investor DNA, it just worked really, really well that you buy something and you hold it and you buy more and add to it, because we're buying great companies. So, which is exactly what we're trying to do, is look for those companies that are really solid, really stable, and growth can be good. And it does have a part. There is a couple growth stocks that I've put money into. One of them I just finished building out a position in, but it's that whole fall in love, hold it, never sell it. With growth stocks, if you want to, now there's a good and a bad. Like if you ask Warren Buffett, they'll never pay a dividend because he wants to return money to shareholders through buybacks, right? So when you get to, when a company buys back their stock, it's still returning cash to shareholder. It just means there's less shares outstanding to spread the earnings over. So the shares should be more valuable. But you as the investor get to decide when you want to take the tax hit on those by selling shares of the business. But with dividends, obviously we're paying taxes if it's in a taxable account on those dividends received. But in a nutshell, what I want to do is to just hold stocks and receive the income, receive the interest, live off the interest maybe someday, and not have to touch the principal, meaning never having to sell the stock. So if you have shares of Tesla and you need cash, you have to sell your shares of Tesla. So that's kind of the idea, what I really fell in love with dividends, and why I continue to be a dividend investor. And like I said, there's no perfect thing in the market, because if there was, everybody would use it. I know a lot of people like to look at numbers, but I heard a really cool thing that Steve Cohen had said, was that if it's math, it's not an advantage, because if you can calculate numbers from the financial statements, then it's not an advantage, because anybody can do that. And if you can become an accountant and get really good with numbers, then and predict the future, what's going to happen with a stock, then accountants would be the richest people on the planet. But because they're not, means that you can't predict what's going to happen with the stock just from the numbers. So the numbers are important, but there's also a story to it. So you got to kind of take the numbers and then see how that influences or what the story behind the numbers is. And to wrap that thought up, for me, I like to try and simplify things even further. So if I buy a company, I want to ask, in 10 years from now, do I think this business is still going to be profitable? And you kind of try and look at, is there something that could just come out like if it's a technological advantage and it could decimate a company's earnings, kind of like Intel did with NVIDIA. AI pops, NVIDIA's big in AI, and now all of a sudden Intel's not. And, there goes that. So that was one of my, not good investments was Intel, but that's pretty much it, man. Just holding a stock, getting paid, and hopefully never having to sell the stock. And getting dividends that are rising too. So dividend growth investing, we call that.
This is almost a perfect segue now into this next question for you. But there's been so many answers that I've received, especially, every time I've been able to chat with different folks on the channel, and just the variety of answers, right, that I've now gotten. I want to throw yours into the mix. When it comes to building a dividend investment portfolio, I feel like we have, the guys like myself, where I used to actually have a much larger portfolio. I've been avidly working on trimming my portfolio since 2020. I always say, a mistake of mine, or a regret rather, is spreading myself way too thin. And, 2020 hit and all these stocks were on sale. So I bought a ton of stocks, but way too thin on each of them. And I should have focused on, the 10, 15 high quality companies that I really enjoyed, that I would never sell, and just that's it. What happened was I bought a ton of stocks. My portfolio went from like 10 to 15, I think, positions to 40 plus. Sometimes, at some points I had 3, shares worth of X company with a 90, cent dividend that would come in on a quarterly basis. So what am I doing? So I started trimming, and I took advice, from a Bill Ackman video in which he shared, at any given time, there's really only like 3 high quality companies that are out there. Try to find those 3, but at really any given time, there's going to be like less than a handful. So I took the approach, in Bill Ackman's portfolio, of course, at that point, he had 10 holdings in his portfolio there. And I think now he's down to 7. So still on that same strategy. And I feel like I have a grip on more quality stocks in my portfolio. Of course, some months now you'll see, I'll post in the coming days, the August income video. And is it as high as it may have been if I didn't sell out of some of these stocks? No, but my quarterly dividends now are much higher. So at the end of the day, it doesn't matter for me. Where I'm getting with this, when it comes to building a dividend portfolio, are you in the camp of having 5 to 10 stocks? Or are you in the Jason Fever camp where, it's like over 100? Or we just had Chuck from Fast Graphs on. He was dead on 25 holdings in a portfolio. That's what you should manage. That's what you need. No ifs, ands, or buts about it. What's Russ's take on a dividend portfolio count for holdings?
What a great looking question. So it's going to be a kind of a generic answer, but it's like different strokes. It's just what may be right for you may not be right for some. And sure, it's all why we, that trite saying, it's personal finance, because it's personal. So I was kind of like you too. Like in 2020, I wish I had some more focused attention, because I probably had, I don't even know, I'd probably have to guess 30 some holdings. And it was like, I look back now and I think the cheapest I got McDonald's was maybe $135 a share. And it was like 1 share, because I was buying Johnson & Johnson and 3M and AT&T, and I was buying, ExxonMobil and Chevron and just Lockheed Martin. I was buying all these things. And I look back, I was like, man, I can't even imagine if I would have been able to focus like most of that into McDonald's at $135 a share. That would have been awesome. But just like you said, man, that's one of the risks you take. And like, what does Warren Buffett say about risk? He says risk comes from not knowing what you're doing. And, we can't all be Warren Buffett. I know a lot of us like to think we can be, but it's easier said than done, right? So I think that's why I also started gravitating into SCHD, especially with 3M. I thought 3M was a steal under $200 at one point. And as we're getting to the 170s, I was buying 160s, 150. I just kept buying them. And then it goes to show that the black swan is always lurking, and it can strike any company at any time. And there's a saying, if it's possible any day, it's possible today. So any company, for any reason, I just did a podcast on the Tylenol murders. Now, thankfully, Johnson & Johnson, a lot of people don't know, in 1982, they had an issue where somebody in the Chicagoland area, they bought up a bunch of Tylenol before it had the tamper-proof packaging. They injected cyanide into Tylenol capsules, went back into several different stores, put the bottles back on the shelf, and 7 people lost their life. So it was a really, really sketchy area there for a little while with J&J, and the company took a big hit. They lost market share. They were thinking of renaming Tylenol. Nobody knew what was going to happen with that, but it just goes to show, like, it wasn't even their fault. Like, it was completely not their fault. And it was a really big black eye. Now, they handled it masterfully, their response to the whole situation. And they even came up with the things we know now, like the plastic seals. When I was a kid, they like overlapped the pills, and they put the medication inside. You could open it up and close them back again, the thing you would swallow. But there was a lot of consumer protections that came out of it. Yeah, the capsules, exactly. Yeah. So there was, I don't know, probably 6 or 7 consumer protections directly related to that. So yes, 7 people lost their lives, unfortunately. But again, going back to that, finding the silver lining in anything, I like to think that those 7 people, they saved the lives of many, many more people from copycats and just more unfathomable things happening. So it just goes to show that with 3M, what happened, and they were down below $100 a share. I just started selling smaller ancillary positions and just buying SCHD, which I really like. It's, I know it was the thing everybody's talking about for a while, but I think with good reason. Sure. And yeah, so right now I have a few core positions. And if those get cheap enough, because that's kind of what they say, like, look for a cheap stock and just buy it and hold it. And if you do that, then you'll be a successful investor as long as the company is a good business.
Now, you mentioned just a bit ago Warren Buffett, right? And Warren Buffett is, of course, the sage of all sages when it comes to the world of investing. The king. But for me, when I look at Warren Buffett, I always try to pinpoint what it is about his character, his investment strategy that makes him so successful. And I want to ask you, in your opinion, what is it about Buffett that we really just don't see, like, the carbon copies of Buffett out there, if that makes sense? Like, I feel like his strategy is ridiculously easy. And even Buffett shares about it sometimes when he says, like, I'm looking at good companies, I'm investing. The thing is, he doesn't have, like, for me, like, this get rich by Tuesday mindset, which is why we don't see a lot of those carbon copy Buffetts. But what, if you had to pinpoint it about Buffett, makes him like the icon of an investor for all of us to look up to?
Man, just simplification. He simplifies everything. And his strategy is really just invest in what you know. You better understand what you're investing in, because the more you understand something, the better the likelihood that you'll be able to predict what it's going to do in the future. And obviously, nobody knows. That's why I laugh when I see other YouTubers and things, and they're giving me like a 10-year price prediction, and they're discounting the cash flow bit. I'm like, what? Like, come on, like, anything can happen in 10 years. To think that we could possibly know in 10 years from now what the cash flow is going to be of any business is just complete insanity to me. So, but yeah, but moats, like Warren Buffett had said when the internet came out, he said, I don't think this is going to change the way people chew gum. Like, so simple. And a lot of people were like, no, you got to buy all the high flying tech stocks. And he just ignores the noise. He invests in what he understands. He won't, the things he doesn't, which is what I've tried to to do is he has a too hard pile, and him and Charlie will say it just goes in the too hard pile. So I recently did that with Alibaba. I thought I understood it. More I looked into it, I was just like, you know what, too hard pile. Just put it in there. I ended up selling out of it. But yeah, and then just really simply is just cash flow, like looking for businesses that are awash in cash and have a moat, meaning that they have a share of the consumer's mind, like Coca-Cola does. Hershey's has a share of the consumer's mind. Things that people aren't going to just give up tomorrow, or it's so simple. It's almost, why we can't all be like that. But, and I know we could try to mirror him and, do what he does. But I mean, at the end of the day, it's you know what I mean? Struggling. It's like, so what does Warren Buffett do? Tell us how we can be more like him. I'm like, Jesus. But yeah, it's
the first things that came to mind was, like, for me, temperament with Buffett, because whether the market is up or down, and you said it, right? Buffett's going to ignore the noise. And I feel like, I don't know if it's like a more of a recent problem with society, or if it's always been this way. And, of course, I wasn't around 50 years ago, so I don't know. But like, I feel like today it's even more of this, instantaneous gratification society or culture that we're living in. Very, very toxic. But then you got a guy like Buffett who's still going, driving it. What does he drive? A Honda or Toyota? So he drives one of those cars. He still goes to McDonald's, gets his coffee, still goes to the office, right? Like, he hasn't changed a thing. And there has been so much noise, even to the point where, when he talks about getting invested into Apple, right? Or using the iPhone, like he was like, I'm good. I don't need it. And to me, it's like this temperament that he has. You just can't mess with him. He'll just put some earplugs in and everything's fine and dandy in his world. He'll look at what he needs to look at, the balance sheets, the company, and do his due diligence, make a decision, forget the noise. But on the flip side now, I want to talk about what you think the biggest mistake out there is, or the most common mistake that investors are making. Because, you have your YouTube channel, I have mine. And with everybody who's coming on, different speakers, this is a question I love, because I think we're all seeing from different viewpoints what, how either ourselves we're making mistakes, or what others are commenting on our channels and asking for help. I'm sure you've gotten emails or comments about if you can help somebody, or what would you do in a certain situation. What would you say is the biggest or most common mistake that investors out there are making?
One of the oldest ones, and I think it's an inherent flaw with human beings that we have to constantly fight against, is trying to get rich quick. So Rick Guerin, a lot of people don't know who Rick Guerin is. He was a partner of Buffett and Munger's back in the early days, and he could have been a billionaire along with them, but he wanted to get rich quick, and he ended up, I believe, I forget how the story goes. You guys can Google it. It's, head's fuzzy, but I think he sold his share of Berkshire to get money to put into something else, and it went kaput. So Buffett always says he wanted to get rich quick, so he didn't want to get rich slow. That's why he's not where we are. So I think that's pretty much the biggest mistake is, and I feel it too. And it's like the bulk of Buffett's money was made after he was 65, I believe. Yeah. But a lot of us don't understand that the reason he's made so much is because the boring has to happen now. The sooner you get the boring out of the way, the brighter the future will be. You don't do the boring now, you're going to do the boring later. So I think that's kind of where I'm at, is a lot of us don't want to see that, oh boy, I got $4 in dividends this quarter, but like I always tell people, I'm like, don't be afraid. Don't be sad at that, because without $4 in dividends a quarter, you can't get to 400 and you can't get to 4,000. So you have to start somewhere. Like that old saying is, a journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single step. So if you don't take that single step, if you don't get that first $5 in dividends a year, you're not going to get to 50 or 100,000 in dividends a year. So I think it's just patience and sticking at something for a long time. And just like you said, dude, with the social media, is that our minds have become like guppies. It's like everything's just now. I bought Tesla on Monday and it's Friday. Like, why am I not rich? It's like things need to take time. So that's one of my bigger takeaways from Buffett is that, again, he says people just don't want to get rich slow. They want to get rich quickly. And also, he says two of the things that destroy people, this is his words, are liquor and leverage. So just be careful if you're dealing with liquor and borrowing money. So there you go.
Love it. I love it. I'm happy to be debt free and sober today. So it's
Beautiful.
win-win. I just, I finished the book called Lost and Founder. Phenomenal book. It's about startups. But I finished this book. There was one part that just came to mind to me as you were speaking, and it's actually, so it was the founder of Moz, which is an SEO company, and he essentially speaks to how he could have sold his startup early on, like I think it was 8 or 9 years in, and he could have sold it for 8 billion. But instead, he decided that he was going to take it off the table because he thought at that point he could become like the next Zuckerberg. And what ends up happening is he's still working to this day at at his startup. I think now just the chairman, but at the end of the day, he speaks about this being a massive regret and saying like, what I thought was cool at that point in time was becoming a billionaire. And so my company, where I could have just sold it and, maybe not become the 40, 50, 100, billionaire, I could have taken my 8 billion, retired my family, retired generations to come and bet. And he goes, I made a mistake because I wanted more. And I think that goes hand in hand with this get rich quick and I want more. And to your point, when it's like, sometimes you get, and I just spoke about it even like 10 minutes, 15 minutes ago, you get a dividend paycheck. Sometimes it comes in $4.50, or the monthly total comes in. I'll be honest, August for me, I have, I think 2 or 3 more dividend checks that will come in from settlement funds, but I think it's going to top out around $90. Not a lot this month in August. My quarterly next month will be huge, but because of my strategy, not that much is coming in. And so can I still be excited about that $90, $80 to $90 in passive dividend income? And for me, yes, because I realized that I didn't work for that money. I didn't do anything for that. I invested, I got dividends back. It's going to be in that snowball for me and keep rolling, which leads me to now ask you, do you factor in at all as a dividend investor monthly dividends versus quarterly? Does it matter to you? What's your take on monthly versus quarterly dividends?
Yeah, dude, that's so awesome. You just motivated me with that story. Fantastic, because it just goes to show, talking about tales as old as time is the greed. Like, obviously greed, you can go back just eons. That's another flaw with human beings. And it taps into, I think there's I forget her name. She wrote a book. It's the Indian woman, The Cult of Never Enough, like not knowing what enough is for you. And I've talked about this with my wife. We're still yet to do it, but you're supposed to write down and figure out what is enough for you, because once you hit that point, you can stop, like you've made it, and anything past that is just icing on the cake. So when I hear that 8 billion, I don't know what would have been after tax or whatnot, but yeah, like you could have probably retired your great grandchildren and just had enough to do anything you wanted in the rest of this life. It's like, what are you doing? Like, why do you need all that? So for me, actually, I just ran the numbers because I'm going to do a video after this, but in August, I will have received $447.33 in dividends, almost 450. Now that's again combined across 3 portfolios, 2 of which I can't take anything until I'm 65 or 59 and a half, I think is when it is here currently in the United States. But even if we fast forward, and that's what I was getting now, like, is $450 enough to live off of? No, but that's food, that's groceries, that's various things that we could buy that I wouldn't have to worry about. So I'm not really that focused on dividends exact numbers. And I know, like my guy, European Dividend Growth Investor, he's one of my friends over there in Europe. That's the name, but he has a specific amount, what he's trying to get to and what he's working for. But for us, it's just like, the older I'm getting, I'm thinking that I'm always going to be doing something. And like I was just telling you, that human beings are meant to solve problems. That's why I think a lot of trust fund babies are miserable people, because they don't have to do anything at all. They just exist. And I think just existing can be a really, really horrible thing. So yeah, I'd be careful I say that, because there's people with disabilities that, but still, if you can contribute something, like whatever it is, helping people, being part of something bigger than yourself, just contributing to humanity in a positive way, I think is probably going to pay the biggest dividends of all, because as we know, we can't take our money with us when we check out in the pine box.
I love that.
So for me, I'm always going to be doing something. I may not know exactly what it is right now, but probably not something as strenuous as what I'm doing now, welding out in 100-degree heat. Not really going to want to do that when I'm 65. So using the money now to build something, to have some money coming in, where I hope that dividends, or I plan on dividends being a part of income, a part of what I'm doing, and maybe not covering everything, because hey, whatever I'm going to find, I'm always going to be making money. So that's going to help. And it's just, the shift is going to be into making money, doing something I love and something that makes me happy, and playing games that make me happy. So dividends will be a nice cherry on the cake, I think is what I wanted to say.
Cherry on top, cherry on the cake, whatever you fancy.
Yeah.
So, when it comes to dividend investing, on my journey thus far, again, I've taken away that for me, it's no longer about the monthlies, the quarterlies. It's just about income coming in. Is there income coming in? And can I be grateful for the $4.50 as much as I can be from last month when I brought in 400 and something dollars, right? And that answer is yes. And then it gets down to exactly what you shared, which I really love. And I have actually yet to talk to anybody about this on any of the Master of the Market chats, which is what's enough. And that brings me to what my dad always and still does shares with me, which is, Ari, what gets done in life is always measured. And I remember being, younger, and he would always sit me down and he would say, what type of life do you want? Right. And when I was younger, I was like, I want to be rich. And my dad would say, what does that mean? That's not right. Rich is not a thing. You have to understand what rich really is. What does it look like for you? Go find on Zillow the house you want to live in, how much it costs, the car you want to drive. Now, as growing up, I always had people in my life that I want to say were financially fit, right? My father, very financially savvy, and someone whom I still respect and always call today. And we always talk about the market, what's going on, the stocks to invest in. I think Ryan always gets at me because my dad used to work for J&J, so my heart's with J&J. But and then I have my uncle who used to work at Fidelity and be a money manager there, managing about 25 billion. And so when I would go to his house, with the cousins, he would always share, pick a company that you're using their products and that you do understand and that what their products do and you like and enjoy their products. Start to read about the company, start to invest into the company because you're already using the products. So I always had, I feel like, people in my life who are guiding me in the direction of, where I'm now heading today, which, I like to think financially savvy, right? And in tune with what's going on in the market and keep beating this drum of mine to hopefully one day financial freedom. But I got to ask you, and I think it might be your grandfather or uncle, because you mentioned them before. Who would you say is your biggest hero or mentor or someone in your life that has really shaped who you've become today?
Yeah, so I want to give credit where credit's due. I had to Google it. The Cult of Never Enough is a book by Manisha Thakur. So she just wrote that book, and I heard her on a podcast not too long ago. I don't remember which one, but yeah, she exactly talked about that. She got into this lifestyle where just grind, hustle, work, drop the kids off at daycare, make big deals, and then she was just burnt out at it and was like, it's just not making me happy. I'm just grinding and grinding for more money, just more, more, more. It's just so I love that. I just had to give a shout out. That bothers me just saying, oh, this woman I heard that wasn't good enough. So Manisha Thakur, there you go. Cult of Never Enough. I'm proud. That's on my list to read. But as far as people that shape me, yeah, man, it's absolutely my grandfather. And like I said, finances, I probably should have picked his brain a little bit better. But I mean, him and my grandma. So, we'll wrap it up where it started is that my mother and father were young when I was born. My mom was 18 and my dad was 19. So they were kids. I can't even imagine. My kids are almost at his ages now. Wild. But yeah, so he took off before I was a year old and I really didn't have a dad. So until I was 10 years old, my grandfather was the father figure in my life. And then I got a stepdad and I had a lot of problems with him. So back to my grandpa, like being involved and kind of pulling me through those rough teenage years. And then, I just lost him in 2003, I think, or 2005 is, he was 92. But yeah, it's so strange spending so much time with somebody that lived through the Depression and was in their 20s when the Great Depression hit, and then instilling a lot of those values onto me. So I've always been a little bit frugal. I wish I was more frugal than I was before, but now it is just trying to find those things that bring me true joy and happiness and spending lavishly on those while still investing and also being frugal on pretty much everything else, sometimes to a fault, but that's who it'd be. And then as an investor in world of finance, I mean, just a million. Again, Warren Buffett is probably one of the big ones. And I think one of his quotes that I absolutely love, other than the one that actually, I didn't put this out there. One of the things that really shifted it was his famous quote that says, if you don't learn to make money while you sleep, you will work until you die. But I think what he misses there is if you love the work that you're doing, if you truly enjoy it, because what is he doing? He doesn't have to do it, but he always says he tap dances into work because he loves doing it. So, nothing is the be all end all. But I was just thinking, he has another quote that says somebody's sitting under the shade of a tree today that was planted a long time ago. So that's the kind of the getting the boring done early. But he also says, learn from your mistakes, and better yet, learn from the mistakes of others. So I think that's what mentors can be. And a lot of people, like I just started reading this book from the library by Guy Spear called The Education of a Value Investor. And it's just great. He shares a lot of his mistakes because he thinks mistakes can be a lot more instructional and informative to someone like myself than just, excessively going over his victories and his wins. So I think, my grandfather, and then just everybody who shares their mistakes with me that can help me be a better person or investor are my, that's a lot of people.
It's beautiful. No, great answer. And I want to wrap up with, we have two more questions here. One I am dying to know, and the other I'm just very interested to know your opinion on. We'll start with that one. Now, as of last week into this week, a couple of reports that will be coming out. I always like to touch upon the macros. I'm a big macros matter guy, but we just had a job openings report come out, and it did show signs that the overall economy is essentially weakening, which is essentially what the Federal Reserve has been looking to do, right? And interest rates now may jump up another notch, maybe not, all dependent upon the data. But Powell and the Federal Reserve have been tremendously hawkish rather recently. We know interest rates are higher. We know inflation has come way down since a year ago this time, but still at 3.5% as of right now. For me, I look to the future, the end of, like we said, we can't predict it, but we can try our best to look ahead and just try to find the sectors and stocks, to maybe have our eyes on, spot trends. I'm looking ahead, and for me, I'm, kind of worried. I'm kind of uncertain about how the end of the year will be. And I think there is a bunch of uncertainty that's brewing out there, regardless of if inflation continues to come down, interest rates are going to be higher for a prolonged period of time. That pressurizes businesses. That's in the history books as well. I want to get your take on how you're going to be investing to conclude 2023. We got a couple months here. left? And then perhaps into 2024, what's your big strategy going to be?
Yeah, so you're not gonna like it, but for me, I'm not a macro person. I guess, yeah, you can use it to look for opportunities and try to spot a trend coming, but I don't know. Part of me thinks that might be a little bit like maybe timing the market, but it does matter. It is important to watch what's going on. I do think it's a weird thing that everybody is kind of hoping for a bad labor market and kind of putting the economy into, you know, I mean, you're hoping for a bad economy, so rates will eventually start cutting. So it'll spur the economic growth engines again, which is, it's just such a weird thing in investing. And yeah, inflation's coming down, which has been nice, but they still say that, they want that 2% target range. But is that 2.1%, 2.9%? Would they consider 3.1 close enough? But so I think that I like real estate. I know it's been hammered, and there's a lot of reasons why real estate has been hammered. I think companies that don't have a lot of exposure to the commercial real estate, like Realty Income, which I like them, they spun off VEREIT. They merged, they merged with VEREIT, which was a very similar company. And then they spun off Orion Office Properties, ticker ONL. So they kind of saw, I think, what was coming, and which is why I like Realty Income. They have a really adept management team led by Sumit Roy, where he was like, you know what, nope, we want to get rid of the office properties. So good luck out there, ONL, which has gotten clobbered since they spun it off. But and they also is a thing, right? They say if everybody's expecting something, it usually doesn't come to pass, or at least not the way everyone's expecting it, because by now everyone was expecting we'd be in recession. So real estate, I'm going to keep going into real estate. It's going to recover eventually. Someday the rates will start cutting and real estate will start sucking money back away from bonds into real estate, which has obviously been a traditional place to get yield when you got yield starved investors and they're not getting it in the bond market. So I think a lot of money got sucked away when the bonds started going up and interest rates started rising. But I don't know when that's going to be, but I like Realty Income and I like Innovative Industrial Properties, ticker IIPR. So those are two real estate plays that I keep investing into. And yeah, just someday, dude, someday rates are going to come back down. Don't know when. And when they do, I expect all the REITs to start going up. So I would look into REITs and by extension, the utilities too. A lot of the utility companies as well. So
I love it. I love it. And my last question for you here,
Yep.
it is the best question I think I can ever ask an investor.
Ooh.
Russ, I'm giving you 10,000 virtual dollars. The name of the game here is that you cannot invest it into an ETF. You got to pick one individual stock. It could be any stock that you want, but I'll give you that $10,000 right now. What stock would it be?
Well, I love it. If I had to pick one, if you just want something right off the top, I want something that's cheap, is a wash in cash, has a lot of cash flow, and I think is a little bit misunderstood, which can mean it's going to have a bit of a run up, and it's really going to be boosted by the presidential election. Talk about macro things that's coming next year. And that would be Nexstar Media, ticker NXST. Digital media company. They own a lot of broadcast stations. So they do there's a lot of moving parts we won't get into, but one of the facets is when you see political ads on television, when it's their networks, they're going to get money from that. So really well-run company. They're still run by their founder and CEO, Perry Sook. He just re-upped his contract through 2026. He's the biggest shareholder. Yeah, it's just, I really enjoy that company, and I think they're a little bit misunderstood. And they just brought on as their chief operations officer, Mike Bayard, who was over at Fox, and they're trying to grow a network they have, the CW. They're trying to make that into a kind of a clone of Fox, how it was with the live sports and programming and whatnot. So I just think it's a really interesting company. And if I had to, I'd probably go Nexstar Media.
Go in. I love it. Investors, Russ from Dapper Dividends joining us. If you have not checked out his channel already, you have to head over there. I know I am certainly on his channel when he posts new videos, grabbing some dividend ideas from Russ. But again, Russ, I want to thank you specifically for joining me on the Masters of the Market chat, and certainly hope to have you back on here for another go round sometime soon. But thank you so much for this go round. And investors, again, get over to Russ's channel. And until next time, we will see you all there.